I grew up in Great Falls, Montana. I had a wonderful family with great parents, and I had an experience that happened when I was 7 years old that really altered my worldview. I got sick with the measles, and I was really ill. My parents had made a bed for me upstairs on the couch so that I could be near their bedroom. I had overheard them talking about the plan for me, and the plan was that the next day I was going into the hospital and I was going into something called an oxygen tent. But something amazing happened that night. My parents came into the room. Everyone else had gone to bed. My mother said to my father, she said, "Honey, will you kneel down by the couch with me and will you pray for our boy so he'll be able to get well?" And so they did. They kneeled down by the side of the couch, and my dad starts praying. Now, knowing my dad, it was probably the first time in my life that I'd actually heard him pray out loud. But they were very concerned about me. And as he was saying this very heartfelt prayer, I had a change that happened in my body. It started at the top of my head, and it went whoosh through my body, and I was healed instantly. Now, to go from being really sick one moment to being completely well in the next instant, it's such a remarkable, impossible thing that you don't ever forget it, no matter how long you live. And I remember it like it happened yesterday, and it was many years ago. So I held my tongue until my dad was done praying, which didn't take long. And when he was done, I said, I'm better. I feel completely fine. And they said, "Well, that's fine. Go back to sleep now. Tomorrow you're going into the oxygen tent." And so, but the next day proved it that I was better. So what I learned from that was that there is a higher power that we can draw upon. I really internalized that, and I thought about that a lot. Well, fast forward about another 7 years, and I ended up developing kidney disease. I started getting these pains in my back that got worse and worse and worse until suddenly they reached this unbelievable crescendo where these pains would put me on the ground or just take my breath away. It was like being run through with a sword or something. And my parents were very worried. They took me to see some doctors at the hospital in town. And they ran these tests on me, and they said that I had kidney disease, that there was nothing that they could do. I was either going to get better or I wasn't. And if I didn't get better, then I wasn't going to survive, because you can't live without kidneys, and they didn't do kidney transplants back in those days. But there was nothing they had to offer. So my parents decided they would take me to see some alternative doctors. And these doctors practiced out on the edge of town in an old trailer house. And so I started going to them, and it was about as big of a contrast as you possibly could have found between this very expensive clinic where I'd been diagnosed and this trailer house out in the middle of a muddy field where these other doctors were working. But these doctors seemed to know exactly what I needed. And so as they were working with me and working on my body, I started feeling better right away. And within a few weeks, my pains were dramatically better, much less frequent, much less severe. And in about a month, I was feeling completely well. And so my parents took me back to the clinic where I was diagnosed, and all the tests were rerun. And as I recall, they actually ran the test twice, and they said, "Well, it's a spontaneous remission. Whatever we did must have worked." And they hadn't done anything. And I knew in my heart that these other doctors had really helped me. And so that's when I decided that's what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to become a natural sort of doctor and help people naturally, because that's what they'd done for me. I've thought about that a lot over the years. And initially, when I went to chiropractic school and I became a chiropractor and I went into practice and I was working with people, I thought, yes, this is true. This is a sacred calling. I'm helping people to get well. Anytime you're trying to help someone function better, help their body work better, or help them to feel better, help them to manifest more life, you're doing a sacred thing, because I believe that the body is really a temple. But that wasn't the end of it. As time went on, you see, because I had learned that there's a higher power we can draw upon, I got in the habit when I was in practice, when someone would come in to see me, before I would do a treatment on anybody, I would pause just for a moment and just silently ask for help from up above, from that higher power, from God. I did that for 17 years in a brick and mortar practice, every patient that I saw. And then for about 2.5 years in a distance practice, it was the same thing. No one ever knew that I was doing that. It was a totally private, totally personal habit, but I was asking for help from up above. And I'll tell you something, I know for a fact that higher power is aware of what we're doing all the time, because there were occasions where somebody would come in to see me and I didn't know how to approach their problem. I didn't know how to help them. And I would offer that silent prayer for help, and the information about what was going on with them and what I needed to do and how I needed to look at their situation. And that information would sometimes just flood into me like an avalanche of data. It's just an incredible thing. That didn't happen very often. Usually we get information from up above in the form of a thought or maybe an impression or an idea. That's how my practice was. During the last 10 years that I was in practice, most of the people that I saw had been told there was really no help for them at all, no cure for them at all. And yet, I was able to help almost all of them because I was tapping into the subconscious mind of the individual and I was asking for help. And I've come to the conclusion that the highest duty of the healer is to act as a go-between for that higher power. So when we try to help someone and heal someone, if we don't ask for help from that higher power, whatever you believe that higher power to be, you are really shortchanging yourself because you're missing out on the ability to get that information and that data and that power behind you, that power that created everything and that keeps everything working.
For just $67, you can make as many videos as you want, and you never need to pick up a camera or use any fancy editing software. With Doodly, you drag, you drop, you tweak some settings, and boom, video done. It'll take you just a few minutes. So, let's hear from the Doodly creator, Brad, to see why Doodly is so easy to use and why you should grab this offer right now.
Hi, I'm Brad Callen, and in this video, I'm going to show you how anyone can quickly and easily create doodle videos, just like the one you're watching right now, using Doodly. Alright, here I am inside the Doodly software, which is available for Mac and PC. You'll notice that you can choose the style of your video, selecting from whiteboard, blackboard, greenboard, glassboard, and for more advanced users, you can even use a green screen background, giving you lots of control over the video style. In this example, let's create a nice looking whiteboard doodle video. You'll notice that Doodly makes it super easy to create your own doodle videos with done-for-you scenes, hundreds of characters, a huge selection of props and images, royalty-free music, and even text. And for the ultimate in customization, you can even upload your own images, fonts, props, and music. Now to create a doodle video, it's really simple. First, I'll add a headline to get people's attention, then center it before adding a character. I like this one. And while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and add a prop too. I'll resize everything and voila! We have Steve reading a book on his chair. Not only is creating a doodle video that simple, but we also have a bunch of really cool settings available too. Doodly allows you to customize your video with real hands, cartoon hands, or none at all, seeing transitions with even camera panning. As you can see, doodle videos do an incredible job of educating, entertaining, and selling, making them one of the best investments you can make in your business. And that's especially true right now. The going rate for professional doodle video creation is anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 to have someone make a video similar to the one that I just showed you. But with Doodly, anyone can create a doodle video regardless of tech skills and experience. If you were to visit the doodly.com homepage right now, you'd see the regular price for Doodly is an ongoing monthly payment, which adds up to $468 per year. But since you've landed on this promotion page, you can get your copy of Doodly right now for a one-time $67 payment. No monthly fees forever. And you'll even have access to all the free feature updates we offer our Doodly users, which is typically once every week. So to lock in this one-time $67 payment with zero monthly fees forever, go ahead and click or tap on the button next to this video to claim your copy of Doodly today. And we look forward to welcoming you to the Doodly family.
Sabe qual é a verdadeira causa das dores nas juntas? Olha, não é o desgaste das cartilagens, não é a falta de exercícios e também não é porque você precisa fazer cirurgia ou tomar algum chá mirabolante, mas sim é a inflamação crônica. Deixa eu te explicar melhor. Bom, de acordo com um estudo recente publicado por um grupo de cientistas da Universidade de Harvard, o verdadeiro motivo por trás das dores nas articulações está ligado à inflamação crônica. Esse é um tipo de inflamação mais persistente e difícil de ser tratado. Ele é o resultado natural de anos de desgaste nas cartilagens pela ação do tempo. O grande problema é que os remédios não curam a inflamação crônica. Eles apenas causam um alívio temporário e ainda criam um monte de efeitos colaterais como ganho de peso, hipertensão, insuficiência cardíaca e problemas nos rins. Só que algumas pessoas não sofrem com a inflamação crônica mesmo depois dos 70 anos. Essas pessoas guardam um segredo que elas nunca irão te contar. Durante os estudos, os pesquisadores descobriram uma planta capaz de acabar com a dor em menos de 7 dias. Muitos brasileiros usam essa planta ou até têm ela em casa, só que 99% das pessoas usa ela do jeito errado. Essa planta é tão eficaz que uma pessoa de 70 anos que usa ela da forma correta terá esses resultados, enquanto uma pessoa que usa essa planta do jeito errado terá esses resultados. Se você se identificou com a segunda pessoa, então você precisa descobrir a forma certa de usar essa planta. É justamente esse o segredo que algumas pessoas muito espertas estão usando para acabar com a dor sem precisar tomar remédios, chás ou fazer cirurgia. O problema é que você não vai ver esse tipo de informação na televisão, em algum vídeo do YouTube e muito menos procurando no Google. Alguns médicos que tentaram divulgar esse método tiveram suas carreiras destruídas por causa do risco que isso representa para a bilionária indústria farmacêutica. Se você quer descobrir o que é, clique no botão azul escrito Saiba Mais e veja a apresentação que eu preparei para você. Faça isso agora, porque esse vídeo não vai ficar no ar para sempre. Esse segredo é muito bem guardado e talvez você nunca mais tenha a chance de descobrir a maneira certa de fazer isso de novo. É rápido, fácil e você pode fazer ainda hoje e acabar com a dor em questão de pouco tempo. Então, clique no botão escrito Saiba Mais, que está aparecendo para você agora, e tire vantagem desse segredo enquanto ainda é tempo. Espero você lá!
During the years that I was in practice, I was really obsessed with getting to the underlying causes of people's problems. I had no interest at all in giving people a Band-Aid sort of remedy. I wanted to really fix them. And as a holistic doctor, which is really what I was, I didn't have the license to give people medication to suppress their symptoms. I didn't have a license to do surgery on anybody. So I was left with this dilemma really of having to figure out what was really wrong with people. The beauty of it, though, you see, is that within each one of us, we have this subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is vastly intelligent, more than we can even comprehend. That's the part of you that is creating millions of new red blood cells every minute. It's the part of you that can take a ham sandwich and can convert that into new cells and new nerve cells, new muscle tissue, and so on. So it's an order of understanding really that a level of intelligence that we don't really understand. We haven't really even scratched the surface. But what I found is that I could tap in easily to that subconscious mind within each person and ask questions. And the subconscious was very willing to give those answers. And so as time went on, I found that the single biggest common denominator for every patient that I saw, no matter how young or old they were, no matter what their condition was, whether it was a mental or emotional or a physical problem, they all had something in common, and that was what you might call their emotional baggage. And really, to understand emotional baggage, you have to understand the body itself. If you look at your hand, for example, your hand looks pretty solid, but if you were to magnify your hand enough, eventually you'd be looking at an individual atom. And if you were to look inside the atom, you'd see there's really nothing in there, just empty space and some infinitesimally tiny energies that are zipping around at the speed of light. We live in this illusion that these bodies of ours are solid, but they're not really. They're more a force field than anything else, right? And so that's really what we are. We're beings of pure energy. So what I found is that when you're feeling an intense emotion, because every emotion has its own vibrational frequency, what's going on in your body on a quantum level, when you're feeling an intense emotion, is that your whole body is taking on this emotional vibration of whatever that emotion is, frustration or anger or resentment or grief or whatever. And it's during those times, typically, that if that emotion is too powerful, some of that energy becomes trapped in the body. And so we call that a trapped emotion. And this is literally what our emotional baggage is. So there were many situations that happened to me over those years where I learned how powerful this emotional baggage is. One of the very first people that I actually treated that was a very powerful experience for me was a woman that came in to see me who thought she was having a heart attack. She had crushing chest pain, difficulty breathing, left side of her face was numb, her left arm was totally numb, and this had been going on for about 24 hours, getting gradually worse. Well, it looked like a heart attack to me. I told my staff we might need an ambulance. Luckily, we were very close to a hospital. But I did some testing on her very quickly and found she had a trapped emotion. And a trapped emotion is literally a ball of emotional energy from about the size of a baseball to about the size of a softball, and it was lodged right here in the heart. And so I was able to figure out when this had become trapped in her body, and that was 3 years before. And the emotion was grief. And when I arrived at that conclusion, she said, she actually burst into tears, and she said, I can't believe that's affecting me. I thought I dealt with all that. And I said, well, what happened to you? And she said 3 years before, her husband had been having an affair, and she found out about it and confronted him about it, and their marriage blew up. She cried buckets of tears. She was really deeply in love with this guy and was very betrayed. And so she ended up getting divorced and spent a year or so in therapy dealing with the aftermath, and had recently gotten remarried. So as far as she was concerned, that ex-husband was just her ex-husband. But as far as her body was concerned, it was like it happened yesterday, see? And that energy was still there. So I released that trapped emotion, which just takes seconds. And within about 3 seconds, the feeling came back into her arm and into her face. The chest pain was gone. The difficulty breathing was gone. 10 minutes later, she left, totally fine. And has never had another reoccurrence. I'm still in touch with her. That was many years ago. After she left, I remember sitting in my office, and my head was spinning, thinking, how is it possible? What did we just witness there? How is it possible that an emotion could create symptoms like that? And what we have found is that 90% or more of all the physical discomfort that people have is actually due to emotional baggage. Some of the emotional experiences that we've been through, we remember, and some of them we don't. Sometimes things happen to us when we're very young, and we forget about those things consciously. The subconscious mind never forgets anything. It remembers everything, though. We all are carrying emotional baggage from our lives. And some of it happened when we were in the womb because our mother was going through something intense, and we carry that now. Some of that emotional baggage is not even from our own lifetime. Some of it was received at conception from mom or dad, and they might have received that energy from their parents and can go back for many generations. To me, it's really very simple. We have this physical body, and then we have this spirit that is within us. And I believe that that spirit looks exactly like your physical body. If you could take it out of you and put it right next to you, it would look exactly like you in every detail. And trapped emotions specifically distort this field that we are. They distort the physical energy field, because every trapped emotion, remember, is like a ball of energy, and it exerts this distorting force on us. And if you distort the energy field of the body, you're ultimately distorting the body itself, and you're interfering with the chemical reactions going on in those tissues. You're interfering with the flow of chi energy, the acupuncture energy in those areas, and so on. And so it's actually, to me, very simple. When we remove a trapped emotion, when we go through this little process in the emotion code of identifying that emotion and releasing it, suddenly that distorting force that's being put on the body for sometimes many, many years is suddenly gone. Let me share a story with you. There was a man who came into me many years ago who had terrible back pain, and it was a 9 on a 0 to 10 scale. It had been going on for a while, and I tested him and found he had a trapped emotion of anger from 20 years before. And I released that emotion of anger, and he remembered what that was about, what had happened. But when I released that, the pain instantly went from a 9 to a 0. He couldn't believe it. It was like a miracle to him, and he kept bending over and walking around and exclaiming how he couldn't believe it. And I was grateful that it worked so well. But the interesting thing is, this man came back to me a couple of days later, and here's what he said. He said, Dr. Nelson, my back is still fine. I still can't believe it. But he said, I have to tell you something. He said, when I came in here, I had another problem that I didn't tell you about. He said, for as long as I can remember, I've basically been what you'd call a rageaholic. He said, I'm always yelling at my wife and my kids. He said, I'm always on edge. I've got to watch the road rage. I've been to anger management several times and it hasn't helped me that much. And he said, since you released that trapped emotion of anger from me, I feel like a different person. I don't feel that. I'm not on edge anymore. He said, I just feel kind of peaceful and I feel totally different. He said, how did that work? And at the time I said, well, I really don't know. But what we believe is that in a case like that, think about this, 20 years before, this man was going through something really intense. He was really angry. He developed a trapped emotion, this ball of anger. It lodged in his low back and started distorting the energy field in that area. Well, 20 years later, that distortion has been going on long enough that now he's in terrible physical pain. But there's also another thing going on. When a situation would come along in his life where he might tend to feel the emotion of anger, he would feel that emotion much more easily, much more readily than he otherwise would have. Why? Because literally part of his body was feeling that emotion of anger, vibrating at that frequency 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for many, many years. So when we remove an emotion like that, it's not at all unusual for people to not only feel a change in their physical body, but also people feel changes emotionally and mentally. I believe that we're designed to be these pure, clean energy vessels, but the emotional baggage we pick up, the emotional baggage that we inherit, the stuff we pick up when we're babies or when we're in the womb, when we're in high school, junior high, going through divorces and relationships, all throughout our lives, we're picking up these trapped emotions. And every piece of emotional baggage, every trapped emotion is like a little area of darkness that is within us. And so as we get rid of those, we get back to being more of a pure vessel. And so eventually when you release enough of your emotional baggage, it's like stepping out of this old suit that you've been wearing into this new state of being that is much closer to who you really are supposed to be. And that's what this is about. It's about getting back to who you really are supposed to be, who God, the universe, intended you to be. So as I was working with patients day in and day out, I was able to simplify the methodology that I was using, and eventually that became the emotion code. In 2007, I actually published the emotion code as a book, as a very simple method, so that people can learn it, they can do it themselves. I've come to know for myself that the universe that we live in is a universe that is friendly to us. And there is a higher power, and you can refer to that higher power any way that you want. But I know for a fact for myself that that higher power has nothing but love for us, and that higher power wants us to succeed. And I've learned that when we ask for help from that higher power, that help becomes available to us. And it may not be immediately apparent, but looking back, you can connect the dots and you can see how that has been made available to you. So what we teach people with the emotion code is that it's not a denominational kind of thing. If you happen to believe in a higher power, we recommend that before you do the emotion code, you take a moment and you just ask for help. And that's all. It's as simple as that. Just ask for help. And when you do, that help then suddenly is made available to you. We rely totally on the subconscious mind of the individual. The subconscious mind is that vast intelligence within each one of us that knows with a perfect understanding why we might be manifesting symptoms of disease, or why we're suffering from depression, or why we're dealing with phobias or panic attacks or PTSD. So it's a wonderful thing to be able to give up our own control in a sense and just simply allow the subconscious mind of the other person to answer our questions and to be taken wherever it may take us. The heart is a fascinating organ. Back in the 1960s, when doctors started doing heart transplants, it didn't take long before people started coming back to the doctor and reporting strange things, like how their taste in music or sports or food had totally changed, how they would have memories of places that they never in their lives had visited, and yet they had memories of being there. Sometimes their handwriting would totally change. And in every case, when these people were connected with the family of the heart donor, they would find out, oh yes, that's That's our son's handwriting that you have now. How strange is that? Or, yes, our daughter visited those places that you have memories of being. And so, you see, anciently, societies believed that the heart was the core of our being, the seat of the soul. It was the source of romance and love and creativity. In the West, we've never given any real credence to those ancient ideas. If anything, we've really just thought that that was poetic license on the part of those ancient peoples. The new instrumentation now that we've developed over the last 20 years is starting to show us, though, that the heart is by far the most powerful organ in the body, and we now are starting to understand that the ancients were absolutely correct. The heart is all of those things. The heart puts out a magnetic field that surrounds the body up to 12 feet in diameter. And when one person is feeling love or affection for another person, their heartbeat becomes measurable in the brain waves of that other person, and their heart rates will synchronize. It's really an incredible thing. So there's a communication going on between all of us all the time. The problem, though, is that when you feel like your heart is going to break, and that's a physical sensation that most people have felt at one point or another, and that's where those words like heartache and heartbreak come from. If someone's really hurting you or you're really deeply grieved, you can feel like there's an elephant sitting on your chest or like you can't breathe. You can feel like your heart is literally breaking. When that happens, if that happens more than once or twice, the subconscious mind will put up this wall, this heart wall, around that heart to protect it. And it's appropriate at that moment. But the problem is when the bully moves away, or your divorce is finalized, or you quit that terrible job and get a better one, your heart is still inside of a bunker. And it makes it much more difficult for you to connect on a heart-to-heart level with other people. It makes it more difficult for you to fall in love and stay in love. It makes it more difficult for you to feel the love that that higher power has for you. And so when that wall is taken down and that heart suddenly is open again, amazing things happen. People fall in love who never thought they ever would, even at advanced ages. People have creative ideas that start to flow spontaneously because the best creative ideas that you will ever have are going to come from this brain in your heart and not this brain in your head. It's been called the most important discovery in the history of energy medicine. I never discovered it. It was shown to me from above. But it is an incredibly important part of, I believe, this world's evolution because we've been stuck for thousands of years operating from the brain in our heads. But for this world to transform fully, we have to begin operating from the brain that is in our hearts, because that's where love lives. Happiness doesn't come from material things. What happiness comes from is our own ability to feel love and to serve other people. When you perform acts of selfless service for people, how do you feel? You feel great. You ascend. When you cultivate gratitude for what you have, your vibrational level goes up. You feel better. When you forgive also, if you have people in your life that you haven't forgiven, you won't be able to really find peace until you do forgive them. And even if that person is you, you might need to forgive yourself for something. And what I have found, an added benefit of the emotion code, is that when we release that emotional baggage that people have, that is about a certain person or a certain event or something that happened that they've been unable to find forgiveness about, oftentimes they are able then to forgive because it takes the electrical charge out of that event or away from that person, and they're able to finally make peace and really truly forgive. So we live in a world where we have a lot of goofy ideas about where happiness comes from. But I believe that we are all children of that higher power, children of God. We all, I believe, are literally brothers and sisters in a very real way. And we're also all connected through quantum physics so that whatever happens to one of us affects the rest of us. And as we remove trapped emotions and open people's hearts in this world, when enough of those hearts are opened and enough heart walls are taken down, there's going to be a transformation that's going to begin in this world. This is part of that transformational process. It's a key part. That's looking at it on the macro level. To quote St. Augustine, faith is to believe in things that we don't see, and the reward of that faith is to see that which we believed. So Communicating with that higher power is a simple thing. It's as simple as just asking for help. If you're trying to make a decision about something, what I have learned is that if you study it out, if you study the problem in your own mind and you make some kind of a decision, pro or con, about whatever it is you're trying to do, after you've made the decision, when you ask for help, if you feel peace about it, then it's the right choice. If you feel confusion or anxiety about that, then it's the wrong choice. That's how the answer usually comes. Communicating with God, with that higher power, is not difficult to do, but it's a different form of communication than what we're used to. Answers come from that higher power in the form of subtle thoughts, usually, or insights, or impressions, or ideas. Sometimes it can be very powerful. For me in my own life, I've had times where I've literally heard an audible voice when no one was there. Sometimes it's been an overwhelming download of data and understanding. But the vast majority of the time, that's unusual. Usually it's just a little impression or a little idea that comes to you. So we ask for God's help or guidance from that higher power, and that help usually comes to us as a whisper. And it's with our heart, you see, that we receive those answers, I believe. So when you have a heart wall and you've got a heart that is surrounded with layers of depression and anger and resentment and frustration and all that emotional baggage, it makes it much more difficult for you to really connect with that higher power. I think it makes it harder for you to feel and interpret those answers. So when that wall is taken down, people oftentimes can feel that connection with that higher power. They can feel the love for that higher power. Oftentimes people have told us that they couldn't feel before.
Camil é a base do Brasil, porque arroz com feijão é a base de todos nós. É o alimento que reúne a família, a força de quem trabalha, inspira, transforma. O arroz com feijão é a base do Brasil e essa base é Camil.
I think that we chose to come into this world. I believe that before we come into this world, we choose our experiences, we choose our family, we choose where we're going to live, and we choose those things based on the things that we need to learn so that we can progress through this life. And when this life is over, we will have learned some very powerful, valuable lessons that we take with us for the rest of eternity. And so this life is sacred. We are not here by happenstance. We are here for these very powerful, very divine reasons. We're here to learn the difference for ourselves between light and darkness and between good and evil and right and wrong. We get to choose. We're free to choose. We can choose light. We can choose dark. We can choose good or evil or whatever. And we learn from everything. No matter what our choices are, we're learning. But I believe that to really ascend, we need to get rid of that baggage that we're dragging around through our lives because it's slowing us down. And what it's doing is our emotional baggage is diminishing our lives. It's interfering with our ability to really manifest who we are and what our capabilities really are in this world. We live in a world where there are lots of challenges, and we all have emotional baggage. But as we use a simple method like the emotion code to get rid of that baggage, our life changes. We become more capable of unconditional love. We become more capable of seeing people for who they really are, and our life changes in a wonderful way, and we grow much more rapidly without our emotional baggage. We have this battle going on within each one of us all the time, every day. Every day we have choices to make, choices between shades of gray oftentimes. Sometimes the choices are between good and evil, but we are always choosing. And if you think about it, the sum total of all the choices that you make determine who you ultimately become. And so sometimes we make bad choices for a while. We all make bad choices. But sometimes we get to a point where we realize we don't need to make those kinds of choices anymore. We can start making good choices. And so making better choices is easier when you don't have the inertia of all that emotional baggage, all of those areas of darkness within that vessel of who you are, so that we can find out why we're really here and what our purposes are, so we don't waste our time here in this world. There are a lot of false ideas and false traditions that have come down for thousands of years about how mankind needs to suffer to get ahead and how we don't deserve to have success or things like that. A lot of the time, we have inherited emotional energies. I had a very personal experience with this one day. I asked my daughter, Natalie, to work on me, and she was about 1,000 miles away. I hung up the phone. She had agreed to work with me, and so the first thing that she found as she was working with me was that I had an inherited trapped emotion of hopelessness. Now, I had gotten this from my father when I was conceived. That's when these are passed. And she was testing and found that he had gotten it from his mother, who had gotten it from her mother. And this went back 22 generations in the mother's line. And when my daughter arrived at the point of origin for this trapped emotion, this grandmother, all of a sudden, she could feel the presence of this woman standing right next to her. And she could feel her emotion. She could feel how desperate she was to have this emotional energy released, because that's what she'd passed on all these generations. We don't know what she went through, terrible hopelessness, and that energy got stuck in her body, and it was passed down, shared down to me. And I had passed it to my daughter. My daughter released that trapped emotion, and she could feel it ripple through all those generations. It released from all of them. I was sitting at my desk 1,000 miles away, and I had a profound experience. All my life, I had struggled with that emotion of hopelessness, but I never really could put my finger on it. However, if you had asked me during the time that I was writing the Emotion Code book to describe in one word how the project felt, I would, without any hesitation at all, have used the word hopeless. I would have said, well, it feels hopeless, but I'm continuing. And when she worked on me and released this, it was 2 years after the book actually came out. Every day when I would write, before I would be able to write, I would have to watch really positive, really motivational speeches and things to be able to overcome the feeling of hopelessness. When she released that from my whole line, it was like a factory in my mind that had been playing that music of hopelessness 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Every waking moment of my life was suddenly gone. And it was a huge shift. The silence was deafening. And it changed my life, and it changed her life as well, because I had passed it to her. So if you think about it, we all have ancestors, and our ancestors have all been through traumatic things. Science now is proving this, that animals pass traumatic memories. Science doesn't know yet how they're doing it. They don't know how it's passed, but lower animals even will pass traumatic memories down up to 14 generations. And so we call this inherited trapped emotions. These are not known to the conscious mind, of course. Only the subconscious mind knows about these. But it does know. Your subconscious knows exactly what emotional baggage you have that's not even your fault, that was inherited, passed to you at conception. And getting rid of that baggage is also a game changer in many, many cases. I personally have seen cases where people who were suicidally depressed, these are people who had to literally decide every day if they were going to live or take their life that day. I've seen those people get well, and I've seen their depression go away literally in days from having their emotional baggage removed, and especially from having their heart wall removed. And that's really what's driving this global phenomenon of the Emotion Code, is that people read the book and they try it and they find out that it works. So it's a simple, simple thing. And I teach seminars all over the world. About every other seminar that I teach, someone will come to me and they'll say, this just seems too simple to be possible. And my response is usually, well, I can make it more difficult for you if you'd like, but it actually is simple. What I have learned about that is the ego wants to make it complex. The ego of the developer of a particular method, because the ego wants to show people, look how smart I am. I can do this incredibly complex thing, and you can't. But My ego is not involved in the emotion code. I'm just the messenger. Everything that I've been through in my life has prepared me to bring this message, this healing method into the world. It's not about me. It's about everybody else. So what people think about me, or what people think about the emotion code, or what people say, whether it's positive or it's negative, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't concern me. It's none of my business. My job is to just present this to the world. And that's why I do so many interviews and why I travel all over the world and teach. I'm just fulfilling my mission, and my mission is to take this to the world, and then the world can do with it whatever the world wants. We have over 5,000, almost 6,000 testimonials that have been sent in to us from all over the world. One of the interesting things about the emotion code is that trapped emotions affect you in so many ways. They can affect you physically and mentally and emotionally. They are also an underlying cause, we believe, of every disease process that people suffer from. Every disease that we have looked at over the last 30 years has had emotional baggage as an underlying component. Imagine that Western medicine is missing an enormous component that really needs to be addressed. But we're getting there. There's a very powerful vested interest in maintaining the status quo, maintaining pharmaceutical drugs as the method of choice for treating all kinds of things. The problem is, while pharmaceutical drugs have their benefits and can certainly be appropriate at times, they're often not a good long-term solution for people. People take medication. When the medication wears off, the symptoms are usually still there. Most medications do nothing more than really suppress the symptoms. Well, I look at it from a totally different point of view. In my view, the symptom is the body crying out, saying something is wrong here. So to suppress that symptom would be not that good of an idea. And so what we see in the world going on is that as the world is trying to transform and move into this new world where people are really living from the heart, what's happening is the old power structures are panic-stricken, and they're working as hard as they can to maintain their power base. And so that's why you see these movements towards forced vaccination for everyone and shutting down alternative methods of healing and so on. And I just don't believe it's going to happen. I don't believe that these old power constructs are going to be successful. I think that what's going to happen is people are going to continue to wake up more and more and more all the time. And I think that ultimately we're going to get to a place where freedom and people's free choice is going to be recognized. It's going to be a battle to get there. When the Emotion Code book first came out, when I had finished the manuscript, I visited quite a number of publishers, and no one was really interested in publishing the book. Well, since then, things have changed a lot. Energy medicine has become much more popular. Last year, 5 of the top publishers in the world got into a kind of a bidding war to see who was going to publish the Emotion Code. And so that's an enormous shift from 2007. But that's a good sign, I think, for the world, that information like this is being accepted in a much, much more powerful way than it used to be. We are in a stage of man's existence right now that is unlike any other, where our ability to gain understanding is accelerating at a more and more rapid rate all the time. And as we do that, we heal individually, but because we're all connected, we're all healing together as well. The world is definitely struggling. People are struggling to find light, and everyone, I believe, is really searching. They don't know that they're searching in most cases, but people are struggling and they're searching, and what they're looking for, really, I believe, is they're looking for that connection. They're looking for that connection to their real home. And when we come into this world, there is a veil of forgetfulness that's placed over us, so that we don't remember where we were before we came here. We come into this world and we have total and complete amnesia. And we don't know where we were, we don't know who we were, all we know is we're here. But I had an experience one day that taught me something very powerful. I believe that before we came into this world, we lived in a place of perfect beauty and peace and harmony and abundance, and a place of such incredibly high vibration that I think we we couldn't comprehend it here. And I had an experience that taught me about this. I was 18 years old. I was sitting meditating quietly one day, and all of a sudden, that veil of forgetfulness somehow parted to some part of me. I think it was my heart. Suddenly, I was filled with the most absolutely overwhelming feeling of homesickness that I can't even describe. I'd been homesick before, but if you took the most homesick you've ever felt in your life and magnified 1,000,000 times, it might come close. It was just otherworldly. And it was homesickness to be back in that home where I used to live with my father and with my heavenly parents, where we all used to live. This only lasted for about 3 seconds, and then that window closed and it was blocked again to me. And it left me just reeling with awe. And I'll tell you, I learned from that we are really strangers here, that we are just passing through this world. And I learned that if we did not have that forgetfulness, that veil of forgetfulness that's somehow placed upon our memories, I believe we would not be able to stand it in this world for 5 minutes. We're like fish in an aquarium, to the fish in the aquarium, that's all there is. But occasionally you get a fish that jumps out of the water and realizes, whoa, there's a whole other world out there. We're trying to connect, trying to reconnect with we don't know what. And so we try all these different things, but really, truly, I believe it's about reconnecting to that, the source, remembering where, connecting back to where we came from, because we're all here in amnesia, We're born and it's like, oh, what are we doing here? It's one of the fascinating things about the emotion code is that sometimes we find emotional baggage that we picked up before we were conceived. It's not inherited, but that we picked up. In fact, I'll tell you something. I believe that before we come to this world, each of us has had an opportunity to come here at least once and possibly multiple times as a guiding or a ministering angel to someone else, helping another person to go through this mortality. Because sometimes we find trapped emotions that can be traced back 400 or 500 years, 1,000 years ago to a specific spot on the planet. And that's what we're thinking, is that you were there, we've all been here before, to kind of learn, but as an invisible sort of an angel guiding someone else through their life.